Hi, welcome to class. Today it's Chapter 1, U.S. History. Here we go. Today we'll be learning about the land bridge theory. We'll also learn about civilizations of North and South America, the capital of the Aztecs, well, the chief city, I don't know if you want to call it capital, but Tenochtitlan, that's good. Mound builders in North America, and then the Native Americans were influenced by their location and environment. We'll talk more about that. So every day, or the beginning of each lecture, I put a little outline. This is what we're going to learn about. And if it's super important, if I guarantee that it's on a test, or almost guarantee, it'll be underlined. So make sure you write this down, but if you're at least, if you just got to write down the basics, make sure you get the underlined things. So basically what the Utah standards and the book want you to understand is before America, there were people here. Before the English ruled, the Spanish were here. Before the Spanish, there were civilizations. There were the Aztecs. Before the Aztecs, there were the Olmec, and so they want you to understand that North America has had many peoples, many civilizations before America comes on scene. And down here where I talk about influenced by location, environment, so the Native American people, they're way different. Sometimes we think of them as one group, but the different tribes and the different nations, they have different skills and different beliefs. So if you're a Seminole and you're down in Florida, you might have the skills on how to catch an alligator and turn it into moccasins or something. But if you're up in Wisconsin, you've never seen an alligator. However, you know how to survive the cold. You know how to build a fire or a shelter. And so depending on where you live, that's going to dictate what type of skills you have. Okay, so our objective today is to understand what the land bridge is. What is it? Why did people cross it? Something like that. We'll learn about Tenochtitlan. And then what were Native American religious beliefs based upon a reverence for nature? So let's get started with some review. Okay, real quick. Primary source versus secondary sources. Do we remember that? Do we remember primary versus secondary source? We do. You maybe not so much, maybe we're not sure. What's a primary source? Okay, primary source is first-hand account. So write this down. Primary source, write this down. Primary source equals first-hand account. You were there. You saw it with your own eyes. So, in this class, George Washington's diary would be a primary source. A speech that Abraham Lincoln wrote is a primary source. If how do we know that it was cold when George Washington crosses the Delaware on Christmas Eve? Well, because he wrote it down in his journal. He was there. He said it was cold. That's how we know. Okay, secondary source. I'll just skip let me show you the pictures. Primary source could be a coin of ancient Rome, if the coin was there. Could be a map or a picture. Could be some type of sculpture. A secondary source is derived from primary sources. So the person that wrote your history textbook, they weren't at the Revolutionary War. They weren't at, the Civil War. How do they know about these things? They read the primary sources, then they make it ready for consumption. That's a secondary source. This is something that on a test in my class is worth 1 or 2 points, but you need to know for high school, college, you kind of need to know this stuff forever, so you should know it. Especially for you guys, finding information is not a problem. It's figuring out what information is reliable. The quality of the information is hard to know. Primary sources always have less bias and a little different quality. Okay, I know you guys are drifting, so let me give you my world famous analogy. Solberg's is a primary source. Solberg's sells ground beef and buns and cheddar cheese and lettuce, but they don't sell hamburgers. They sell the raw materials. In-N-Out is a secondary source. In-N-Out, you can go, give me a double-double, animal style, with pickles, grilled onions. But you cannot buy a head of lettuce and a pound of ground beef. Does that make sense? In and out is ready for consumption. That's a secondary source. All right, we'll skip the video. Do we know the difference between a fossil and an artifact?
Fossil is a bone, and artifact is just like painting or something.
Okay, that's good enough for me. Fossil was once alive, artifact made by a person. This would be a artifact. Awesome. Okay, just a little review. We'll talk a little bit about physical geography and human geography as well. At this level, meaning middle school, all you need to see here is green versus blue or green and blue. Physical geography, human geography. But as you go to high school and college, you start learning all the little slices. So you go to college, you basically pick one slice from green, one slice from blue, at a location, voila, you're in college. How does the biology affect the economy in Costa Rica? Does that make sense? Like you just get these little subdivisions. But for now, we'll talk about physical geography, human geography. So, if it's made by humans, it's human geography. The city, the road, the aqueduct, the piping. If it's not made by humans, if it's made by nature, the lake, the ocean, the river, the mountain, it's physical geography. This seems super simple, but it's actually really important. Why does Highway 15 run exactly the way it runs? Because it runs at the base of the mountain. If the base of the mountain went over here and then over there, Highway 15 would probably go over here and over there. You wouldn't put the highway. Why is Salt Lake City where it's at? Because that's where the water comes out the mountains naturally. You wouldn't build a city on top of a mountain. You wouldn't build a city in the desert. You'd kind of build it in that sweet spot. Because of the physical geography, that's where the human geography goes on top. And so that makes sense. That's important. What is this? Primary or secondary source?
Secondary.
Secondary source, okay? Your textbook?
Secondary.
Okay. This one?
Primary.
Perfect. Awesome. You guys got it. Ding, ding, ding. What year is it?
2020.
2020. Kind of. Okay, so in our calendar, it's 2020. In the Hebrew or Jewish calendar, it's year 5,780. In the Chinese calendar, it's 4,718. And in the Mayan calendar, it's approximately, because when I did this a day or two ago, it's approximately 13.0.5.3.14. The reason I show you this is because I want you to understand that time is relative. There's no like sawing the earth in half and counting the rings. It's whatever year you want it to be. If everybody on planet Earth got together and said, you know what, we need a fresh start. Let's call it year one. Could you do that in theory?
Yeah.
You could. There's no magical system of time. I just want you to see this because we're going to talk about time real quick. Don't worry, be brief if you're bored at home. By the way, this is the breakdown of the Mayan calendar in case you care. All right. If I say something happened, if I say something happened in 1500, approximately how many years ago was that?
A lot. Yeah.
1500 from now. How many years ago was that?
500 years.
500. We'll just call it that. Okay, that's not perfect, but that's close enough. 500. If I said something happened in 1500 BC, okay? Okay, see, we need to work on the timeline, and that's okay. You at home, I know you're like, oh, dude, math. I'm just clicking through. No. We gotta know how to do this. This is part of the basics. I can't let you go to high school without a quick review. Also, I want to mention, if you don't get it today, don't worry. We'll go over it throughout the year. You'll be great at it by the end. Okay, look. It's 2020, right? You go back to 0, and then you go back another 1500. So it would be 2020, 1500, 3,520 years ago. Does that make sense how I did that though? How you have to go back to 0, and then these are basically like negative numbers. Are we tracking? So if I say something happened in 1500 AD, that's 500 years ago. If I say something happened in 1500 BC, That's a lot longer. That's 3,500 years ago. Okay? Just open your mind to that and understand that that's our time system. Okay? The Chinese calendar, the Hebrew calendar, they don't start at year 0. Also worth mentioning. BC means before Christ, BCE, before Common Era. You'll see BC and BCE. You can use either one. I don't particularly care. AD means Anno Domini, year of our Lord. CE means Common Era. I have no personal preference of what you use. I just want you to understand these are the same thing. These are the same thing. Let's roll. Land bridge theory. This one was underlined, so you'll need to know it. Okay, how do people come to North and South America? So the theory is they spread out from Africa, they go into Asia, and then during the Ice Age, they walk across a land bridge between Russia and Alaska. And I've heard 2 different versions. I've heard that the ice was very thick and they just walk across the ice. I've heard that the ice was so thick around the world that the water level dropped and they walk across the land. That's, to me, it's kind of irrelevant. As long as you understand they're going to walk across and come down here into North America. So this is how people come to North America. Sound good? I was always taught it happens 12,000 to 15,000 years ago. But there's some new evidence that maybe it happened earlier than that. We'll read about that later. There's also another theory that I'm not sure if it's in your book, but they took little boats around the edge that just came down. Whatever. So why would they cross this land bridge? The mammoths are dying out. So either the people followed the mammoths across the land bridge, or the mammoths had died out and they went across the land bridge looking for new types of food. But something about acquiring new hunting grounds. Why do you cross the land bridge? To get to the other side. No, it's a plan. It's to acquire new hunting grounds, okay? The mammoth is important. It's not just your food, it's your house, it's your tools, it's your fuel, it's everything. Okay, mammoth markers. Real quick, check out these little red sections. They're hard to see on this outline, I'm sorry, on this map. That's all the first human geography, the first major human settlements. What would you expect to find there? What would be the physical geography that would make all those places the first human settlements?
Teeny towns.
Teeny towns. What would be the physical geography? What would be the earth characteristic that would create human civilization in these places?
Water.
Water. Bingo. Rivers. Okay, these are all, you got your Nile, your Tigris Euphrates, your Indus, your Yellow, your Yangtze, all these rivers. All right? So around the river is where civilization develops. If the rivers were in different places, that's where the civilizations would have developed, okay? People go from hunter-gatherer to farmer. This does not seem like a big deal. It's a huge deal. And it's a little bit review, but we need to know this stuff. So let's pretend you're a hunter-gatherer, you're a hunter-gatherer, I'm a hunter-gatherer. What do we do as a job? We hunt, we gather. We live in little tribes. But now we're beefing. Now I can't stand you. You can't stand me. So how do we solve the problems?
We're trying to be farmers.
We're not farmers yet. We're just hunter-gatherers. But we can't hang out anymore. I can't deal with the tribe. What do I do? How do we solve this problem? We got people in the tribe that are unhappy. How do we solve it?
Everyone's going to be unhappy.
Okay. We tell them bye. We send them away. I'll stay on this. This will be my hunting ground. That'll be your hunting ground. And the tribe splits and that's the end. Okay? Easy peasy. Now we're farmers. Now we're in the tribe. But I can't leave. Because all the food's in one spot. Does that make sense? We all live together and the food can't leave. I can't just leave without the food. So now we need rules. Now we need a mayor or a governor or a judge. Someone has to say whose fault it is. Maybe I'm not happy that you stay up late. Now we need rules that say, okay, there's a curfew. Does that make sense? We need more. Who's responsible for cleaning up the mess? Who's responsible for watering these crops? We need different, different specialization. So this is where civilization comes from in a lot of respects. Getting these rules and learning to live together because you have to. Hunter-gatherer, you don't necessarily have to live together. Farmer, you have to live together. You have to figure things out. Okay, so it's a pretty big deal. Okay, now we're putting to use what we just learned. The end of the Aztecs was approximately 1521. How long ago was that? About 500 years ago. The end of the Olmec is 400 BC. How long ago is that? Math and history. Awesome. At home, you should be doing some calculations. You should be figuring this out. What do we got? What do we think?
2,420.
There we go. Ding, 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 ding. Awesome. I am so proud that you ladies learned that. You didn't know that when you came in here, but you know that now. So here we go. My point of this is we think of everything in the past. It's just like one big, oh, it's in the past. The Aztecs would have looked at the Olmec like ancient history. Do you know what I mean? If you were in the Aztec middle school, you'd be learning about the Olmec from back in the day, and it'd have been a long time ago. Does that make sense? Like the Aztecs are a while ago to us, but the Olmec are a while ago to even the Aztec. Anyway, just showing you, they want you to know that there were civilizations, then there were more civilizations, then there were Europeans, then the English in America. So when America shows up, it ain't like the first thing on North America, okay? This place had been rocking with different people and different civilizations for over 1,000 years before anybody shows up that speaks English. All right. Olmec are not in your book. You don't have to write this down. They're famous for these heads. When I see that head, you know what I think of?
A baby.
Oh, baby, that's not a bad guess. I think of X-Men, the Sentinel. Doesn't that look like X-Men? A little bit? The Sentinel? Maybe? Kinda? No? A little bit? Kinda? Alright, whatever. Alright. Here are our civilizations that we were talking about. Aztec, right here. Mayan in the magenta. Inca, right there. Okay. This was a test question. Test question alert. Doot, 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 doot. Okay. In North America, in which modern day country were the most civilizations? Or in North America, civilization existed in which modern day country?
America.
Okay. Which modern day country is this area? Is basically what it's asking.
Mexico.
Mexico. Okay, Mexico. The most developed part of North America at this time was Mexico. Okay? That's where the Aztecs are going to be. That's where the Mayans are going to be. And they want you to understand that's what's going on. All right. They have civilizations in North America, specifically the mound builders, but they're not as, I don't want to say about harmonious because the Aztecs aren't necessarily harmonious, but they're not as unified. That's probably the best word. The Aztecs are definitely unified, sometimes by force, sometimes not. Geography, real quick, this is called the Yucatan Peninsula. You should know that. If you don't, look, getting a circling C on a test for Yucatan Peninsula, who cares? You see it in movies. I read it in a book recently. People refer to, oh, he's down at the Yucatan. That just means they're right here. Okay? Check this out. This is the physical geography of this area. Super dense jungle. So what would you expect from people that live in this jungle? You would expect that the cities would be small. It's hard to hack out a big giant city. And all the textbooks say that these civilizations were small little dots on the map, and then they were connected. But I crossed it out because new research says they might have had giant cities. Let's watch the video.
National Geographic reports that researchers have uncovered an ancient 800-square-mile Mayan megacity in northern Guatemala. Archaeologists used light detection and ranging technology, more commonly called LiDAR, to uncover the area. According to the National Ocean Service, LiDAR is a remote sensing method that uses a combination of light, aircraft, and pulse lasers to measure and visualize 3D structures. This lets them remove the surrounding environment to show the scale of the interconnected area. Researchers found some 60,000 structures and said the area was home to millions of people.
So this is where I want you to understand, the events of the past don't change, but history can change based upon new information and stuff like that. So we looked at the physical geography and said the human geography must be this. However, with the new technology, maybe something was different back then. Let's watch this one as well.
We're in the Museum of the Templo Mayor, the main Aztec temple in what is now Mexico City, looking at a small greenstone sculpture of a human face. And although this was found buried as a kind of offering in the temple precinct, what we're looking at is something from a far older culture, older even than the Aztecs.
This mask actually belonged to the Olmec culture, which started thriving somewhere between 1500 and 1200 BCE, so more than 1500 years before the Aztecs. The Olmecs were thriving along the Gulf Coast of Mexico, not even central Mexico, where the Aztecs are later building their capital city.
So this is distant both in terms of geography, but it's also really distant in terms of time. For the Aztecs, looking back to the Olmecs is something akin to us in the modern era, looking back to the ancient Romans.
This mask is not much bigger than the palm of my hand. It's a traditional Olmec mask, and it's made in this beautiful greenstone. It's polished. It's a great example of Olmec features like upturned lips, this almost baby face, almond eyes, the cleft in the head. And what's remarkable is that the Aztecs were actually collecting these objects and then ritually burying them at certain points. And this object would have been one of many buried in a specific offering.
It shows us that the Aztecs had a reverence for the ancient cultures that came before them, that they were thinking historically.
And that's true not only that they were looking to the Olmec, the kind of mother culture of Mesoamerica, but they were also looking to, say, the city of Teotihuacan and its inhabitants that was flourishing hundreds and hundreds of years before the Aztec.
That's the city famous because of its enormous pyramids.
And it was where the Aztecs thought the fifth era or the sun was born, and they called it the city of the gods. That's what Teotihuacan means. And as we look here around the galleries, we can see other masks that were buried in some of these offerings that were taken from the city of Teotihuacan as well.
So the Aztecs were collecting objects from both central Mexico, but also from quite a distance. They were importing materials from what is now the southwest of the United States. They were bringing objects up from the Yucatan. The divisions that we think of in the modern world did not exist in the same way.
It's a great example not only of their archaizing or their looking to the past, but also these vast trade networks throughout Mesoamerica.
All right, now we are talking about corn. And check this out. In Mesoamerica, corn is important, but it's a grass. This was the original corn. That's what we have today. So we're going to look about how did it get this way, and then also, did you know we use corn in like so many different food products? Okay, quick video on that, and then we're going to wrap it up. So we're getting close to the end. If you're bored, stay with us. We're not that far away from being done. All right, here we go. Ancient corn, modern corn.
10,000 years ago, there was no corn, just a grass called teosinte, specifically ZMA's species Pariviglumus. This grass looked little like modern corn. The plant is highly branched, the kernels are small, few in number, not fused, and enclosed in a hard fruit case. But somehow, early farmers turned this grass into corn. So how did they do it? When early farmers grew their proto-corn, each year they selected what they considered the best individuals to take seeds from for the next season. With each generation, the plant was enriched for traits that made it more useful to humans. Over time, random genetic mutations that would improve the crop would occur, and these would be bred into corn by this process. And slowly, the plant became closer to the corn we know today. But that's not the whole story. Up to 12% of the genetic material in corn is derived from ZMA's species Mexicana, and these genes are thought to have been introduced through introgressive hybridization. By this process, genes are introduced into one plant from a closely related plant. It begins with the two lines being crossed, producing offspring where one allele of each gene comes from each parent. Then, by repeatedly backcrossing with one of the parents, we can be left with only a few genes derived from the second parent, effectively introducing these genes into one plant from the other. How intentionally this was done by our ancient Mesoamerican farmers we will likely never know, but we do know that the end result was a humble grass became the power crop we know today. But how easy was it to change a wild grass into something similar to today's corn? Well, in the 1930s, Nobel Prize-winning scientist George Beadle did an experiment. He crossed the wild grass with a domesticated corn, producing an F1 hybrid containing one copy of each gene from each parent, one from the wild grass and the other from modern corn. He then crossed the F1 hybrid with itself, producing an F2 hybrid, and scored the phenotype of these plants. He was looking for how many of these plants resembled modern corn and wild-type grass, and how many were somewhere in between. If you remember your high school biology and your Punnett squares, you'll know what to expect. For each gene, 1/4 of the plants would carry 2 copies of the allele from corn, and another quarter 2 copies originally from the wild grass, with the other half of the plants retaining 1 copy.
Corn has conquered the world in a lot of ways. I mean, it is a remarkable plant. 100 years ago, a farmer in America could grow maybe 20 bushels of corn on an acre. Today, 200 bushels is no problem. That's an astonishing achievement, for which breeders deserve credit, for which fertilizer makers deserve credit, for which pesticide makers all deserve credit.
In the United States today, 30% of our land base is being planted to corn. That's largely driven by government policy that, in effect, allows us to produce corn below the cost of production. The truth of the matter is we're paid to overproduce, and it was caused by these large multinational interests. The reason our government's promoting corn is the Cargills, the ADMs, Tyson, Smithfield, they have an interest in purchasing corn below cost of production. They use that interest and that extensive amount of money they have to lobby Congress to give us the kind of farm bills we now have.
The Farm Bill, which should really be called a food bill, codifies the rules of the entire food economy. Farm policy is always focused on these commodity crops because you can store them. We encourage farmers to grow as much corn as they could grow, to get big, to consolidate. We subsidized farmers by the bushel.
We produced a lot of corn, and they came up with uses for it.
We are now engineering our foods. We know where to turn to for certain traits like mouthfeel and then flavors, and we bring all of these pieces together and engineer new foods that don't stale in the refrigerator, don't develop rancidity. Of course, the biggest advance in recent years was high fructose corn syrup. You know, I would venture to guess, if you go and look on the supermarket shelf, I'll bet you 90% of them would contain either a corn or soybean ingredient. And most of the time it'll contain both.
Corn is a great raw material. You get that big, fat kernel of starch, and you can break that down and reassemble it, and you can make high fructose corn syrup, and you can make malted dextrin and diglycerides and xanthan gum and ascorbic acid, all those obscure ingredients on the processed food. It's remarkable how many of them can be made from corn. Plus, you can feed it to animals.
Corn is the main component in feed ingredients, whether it's chicken, hogs, cattle, you name it.
Increasingly, we're feeding the corn to the fish, whether we're eating the tilapia or the farm salmon. We're teaching fish how to eat corn.
And people, the corn, they crossbreed it, boom, we've got our modern corn, it's involved in everything. I think we're going to call it there. We'll learn about the ball game next time. Quick review. Okay, what is a primary source?
It's something that was actually there.
Okay, first-hand account of information. Excellent. What is the land bridge theory?
It's a theory where they crossed from South America to North America over the...
It's how they get to North America and South America. Okay, you're very close. You're very close. Okay, land bridge theory, you should know that. That's it for today. I'll see you next time.